Welcome back to the Aviation RC Noob Podcast. You found us. My name is Joe.
And I'm Matt.
We're here to be with you along your journey and to share our experiences in RC aviation. If you have any questions, thoughts, or want to share a flight story, hit us up at aviationrcnoob@gmail.com. Now, buckle in. Let's take off.
All right, you're listening to episode 26, part 2, our interview with Red Jensen. Joe and I are going to continue our conversation with Red Jensen, where we cover talking about the Prandtl D, one of my favorite subjects, and I apologize for all those who are not fans. Then we'll continue to talk about the Prandtl M, which is the Mars version. Then we'll talk about internships and projects that were done at the Neil Armstrong base, and just a hair of a conversation, basically acknowledging that Red flies, he's working on a Reno Air Racer. He's actually building an airplane in his garage, which is pretty awesome. Unfortunately, we ran out of time for a detailed conversation about that. But before we do that, let's get back and talk about what we did this week in the hobby. Joe, why don't you start it off?
Okay. Well, last week, by the time this comes out, that Friday night, we had our most recent build party.
Whoop, whoop.
Had a few guys come out, build some planes. I managed to get the rudder finally fixed on the Corsair.
Yay!
Yeah, that was an undertaking.
Yeah.
And as I had mentioned last time, in the process of trying to get a head start on that before we were recording, I just went to cut a wire or cut one of the control rods, and come to find out, in my haste, I had cut the elevator control rod, so I had to replace both of them.
Awesome.
Which, yeah. And then couldn't find my landscaping flags anyway, but had found a wire, so I went by Tractor Supply, picked up some more landscaping flags. And I think I know where those landscaping flags went, the original batch that I had.
Well, did they grow legs and start walking away?
Near enough. Because it dawned on me where they might have gone when I finished working on the Corsair. Now, I still got the motor pods built, but I got to put it in, and I got to take it to the 4-cell and put in there and kind of get the plane finished. So I got to put the motor pod in, put the battery, weigh it, make sure that it's CG'd out right, and then it'll be hopefully ready for a maiden.
Yeah.
Of course, I'll have to get it hooked up to the transmitter and make sure all the channels are right, because I can talk about it, but in trying to get the elevator and rudder push rods or control rods hooked back up, because I'm running a thicker wire, the music wire was able to bend and bow curve a bit through the fuselage. And so you had the coffee stirrers that were helping to serve as the guides for them. But this landscaping wire's thicker and it can't bend that way, or it can, but it doesn't bend and move right. There was a lot of binding that was going to be going on. So,
sure.
They enter from their rudder and elevator from opposite sides of the fuselage.
Right.
So I did that thing where they cross as they're going through the fuselage, which ended up flipping the servos that they were on.
Oh, okay.
So I got to go in, and I think I've already done it while I was at the build table. I just got to double check and make sure that I flip those servos on the receiver proper, so that those are being controlled right. I didn't end up messing with ailerons, so they should be good. Although I did do a little adjustment to make sure that they were level when they were at 0. But when it was all said and done, of course, running the servos a lot, you'll deplete a battery. So I pulled the battery checker out, put it on my 4-cell, and found that 2 of my cells were running at 3.9 volt, which is good.
Yep.
And the other 2 cells were running at 2.9 volt.
And that's not good.
That's not good. I was like,
and if
that's
if left like that for too long, it'll start to damage the batteries. So obviously, the goal is to bring them back up to 3.8 if you can do it individually. But yeah, it's a problem that you need at least a battery charger to fix, right? So
Right. And I don't know how just two cells got so far off on balance. Because it's a new battery. Like,
yeah.
it's not had any flight time on it. So it had a flight with a fogey on it, and that was it. So I'm not sure. Maybe it had that flight with a fogey. I don't remember what battery I was using that day, but it's really not had a lot of use, and two of the cells were way off. So I'm not sure what caused that. But I said, okay, let me find my battery charger. And it was the first time I've had to look for my battery charger in a while. And look, could not find it. And as best I can figure, a while back, it just says how long it's been since I've been flying, I had to empty out my Prius of everything so that I could take it in to have the Prius battery, the hybrid battery replaced. I don't know that I talked about that here, but I had to have the hybrid battery.
I remember that conversation.
The whole pack replaced. Yeah, you and I talked about it. I had to have that battery replaced. And in doing so, I had to get everything out of the car. Well, I'm thinking my battery charger was in the back of the car, and it just got put in a box along with a bunch of other stuff that came out of the car. And that was in the garage. And at some point, somebody grabbed that box and hauled it off as having occupied space. So I have to get a new battery charger.
Well, congratulations. You're going to get a brand new battery charger.
Yay!
No, and that's always a bummer. You're like, no, I had this. I shouldn't have to spend this money on this equipment. I could be doing it some other way.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry to hear that. But, you can look at it in the positive that now you can look for, and that what you had was really good. I think it was a Venom dual charger. Was that what it was, I think?
I don't think so. It only charged one set at a time.
Oh, okay. All right. Maybe I was mistaken. Okay. But either way, it was a quality charger, I remember.
Yeah.
And so, I know we talked about different ones you can get, and I'm sure everybody's got an opinion about it. But, look around, find something that fits what you need. You're not going right now for high speed 6 cell to 12 cell, like super speed stuff. So, you need most average chargers will work well.
They will. And I just got to pick one out and order it. It's because I can't go flying until I get one. And none of my
you may need a new battery.
Yeah, I will have to order a new 4-cell, which will be the third 4-cell now. But certainly not recommended. I know, but when I get the new battery charger, I'll go ahead and order a 4-cell battery. But I do want to hook, because I talked about it before, but I do want to hook my completely depleted and now this imbalanced battery up and mess with them and see if I can get them to charge. But I'll run an extension cord out into the backyard, out in the grass. I'll camp them. I'm not going to be around anything flammable.
I was going to say, and put on a stone, like a stone or something like that, a couple bricks or something, just in case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just in case, and see. And if they do charge, then I just know, I can play with them. But those are not batteries I put in a plane that I'm worried about going up in smoke in the middle of the air.
Right, and the big thing is if you notice that they cannot maintain a balance between the cells, then it's just time to get rid of them, because they will end up being a hazard for you. It'd probably be better to replace them than to replace a garage or house or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Well, they're a hazard as it is now, but
only until you charge it.
Yeah. Well.
Anyway,
so I've got some work done on the Corsair.
Well, congratulations on that.
Thank you. So once I get that, I'll be able to take her out and maiden her.
Nice.
Now, you've had some stuff going on.
Yes. I think I talked last time when we had met and started talking to Red. I had a couple years before that, and you'll hear about it, I had designed and built a foam board, Prandtl D wing, which actually did really well in the glide test. I went to put a motor on it, and it didn't work out for me. But I was thinking, one of the things I didn't like about that build, which part of what's wonderful about Horton wings is they come down to a nice little thin kind of wafer of a wingtip. but foam board really doesn't do well with that. So I thought to myself, well, what if we truncate that and keep it a little bit thicker, but still maintain the same twist and same airfoil sections along the length as the original Prandtl D, just kind of shorten up and fatten up the wing a bit.
Okay.
And Red assured me that it might work. But he said the wing is set up to be kind of based on the chord, the airfoil type at its position in the chord, and its twist along the way. Like they all kind of coincide to come up with the even the bell-shaped drag. The bell-shaped drag distribution that's along the wing. And that's relatively smooth. But anyway, so I decided, well, I'm going to try it anyway. So I did. I got a chance this week to put that together and actually glue it up. It pretty much consisted of lifting the tail, the trailing edge of the outer wingtip, and making sure that the back edge of the top that I kind of folded over, and I removed paper so that it would be a smooth transition. And so in the middle half of the wing, there is like a 1/4 inch distance between the bottom leading trailing edge and the top trailing edge. That's on purpose.
Okay.
And then by the time it gets to the outer part of the wing, they actually meet up. So it's symmetrical and it twists downward. And so by leaving the center flat and twisting the outside about 10 degrees, when you end up setting it up so the thrust angle is proper from the motor, it's going to fly the center at positive 8 degrees or so, 8.5, and the outside will be at negative 1 or 2, and which is what the Prandtl D had been set up for. So I got that set up. The glide tests went pretty well. I did a chuck test, I guess, of the wing with no weight on it, just a wing half. And one of the things I noticed is that it would, like any wing that you don't like balance or anything, it'll just kind of flip back on itself and kind of do a backward flutter as the lift is forward of the balance point of that wing. So it's going to create lift and roll back on itself, basically. Well, what I noticed is while I was doing that, it would yaw towards the center of the wing. The outside tip would rotate towards the center as it was fluttering to the ground. And I did it with the other half, and the other half yawed the other way consistently. I did about 3 or 4 different drops. So I was like, okay, that's really promising. And they're roughly about the same rate. So I've got the wings together. And maybe I'm going to use this as a rule of thumb for myself, and maybe, Joe, that's probably smart on your part too. I'm not going to put anything together before we get together on the show. I'm just going to leave projects where they lay if it's about a half hour beforehand.
Yeah.
So what I ended up doing is I ended up setting up I was testing the motor system, and I wanted to check what direction the motor was spinning. Is it left? Is it right? And I could have put tape on the motor and just set it up and done it.
Which you have preached to me many times.
Right, and I didn't listen myself. And so I ended up having a prop on it, which I didn't think was a huge deal, because generally speaking, it hasn't been for me in the past. And it wouldn't have been, but I was checking out one of the receivers that I have, and for whatever reason, it was not acknowledging, and this one is the one that goes to the Jumper T16. So it was not registering that the throttle was through channel 3 or channel 1, I think, in this specific case. That's what it's supposed to be on. It wasn't registering any throttle response at all. So I'm like, well, I tested the servos were doing what they're supposed to, which is good, and they're centered, which is part of what I needed. But I wanted to just double check to make sure that the prop was the right kind. If it wasn't, otherwise it would be the reverse prop I had to put on. Anyway, I just wanted to do a quick test on that. But I wasn't getting any response. So the other receiver I had on hand was my one that goes to the Radio Master. I selected a model that's for the Arrow. So it's a wing just like the Prandtl D here. Just like the Prandtl D here. And so it's combined elevons, right? Is that elevon?
Right.
But for whatever reason, in that model setup, 100% is the zero throttle. For channel 3, which is what it's set up. The throttle channel is channel 3, the outputs to the motor. So, and I was seeing motor response from channel 3, which is great. That's what I was expecting, except it was inverted. So the channel was registering as 100% and the motor was stopped. And I was in the process of trying to fix that through the ESC, through the normal means, where you turn on everything, throttle's at the top, and then, you wait for it to beep at you saying, oh, I see you want to change this, and then, go through the process to change it. Mm-hmm. And okay, so that didn't work. So I was about to basically set it back to invert, right? So that way, at least it just functioned like it should, where the bottom of the stick is a zero throttle and the top of the stick is actual full throttle. But to do that, you have to fool the transmitter and reverse things, and it's a mess. Anyway, so what I wasn't thinking though is I turned off the transmitter, and I know the problem is I had everything plugged in. So the motor went, oh, the signal's off. I'll bring all the throttle down to 0 or negative 100 or whatever, right? And negative 100 is full throttle for that ESC.
Right.
Because it didn't successfully reset that, which means the motor went full tilt and pretty much the whole thing came at me. And I, like most people, throw their hands in front of themselves so that their hands get whatever's coming and not themselves, which is smart, I guess. Anyway, in the process of deflecting the plane and trying to get out of the way, I ended up cutting. I did everything that you're not supposed to do. So whatever you do, kids, don't do what I do, or what I just did. And I ended up cutting 3 pretty sizable gashes on my finger and a little something on my leg, as I guess the motor was coming down. Got a couple cuts through the pants I was wearing, and that it didn't cut the actual pants, but it actually tore some of the skin on my leg. So there's a little wound there, which isn't huge, but anyway. So if next time I'll report to see if I went to the hospital to get stitches. Right now, I think I'm okay. I'll just be really careful over the next week. Let it heal, do its thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that's another thing where you're like, because you're kind of like, oh, we're about to get into this. I want to get this done to be able to talk about how done it is. You kind of rush through and you miss something you would have seen.
Yeah. And it happens. It's sad, and it is a danger in many areas of life. Really, it just happens to be harmful in the hobby, which is as we do things enough, we get comfortable with them, and we make assumptions.
Yeah,
you've done it.
Yeah, and I should have unplugged the battery before I turned the transmitter off.
Yeah, we get comfortable because we've done it enough times. We start making assumptions about the equipment we're working with, or what the conditions are. And I've done it. You've done it. I've said before. I told that story. I stuck my finger in a prop. For even while I was spinning, for dumb reasons. Thinking something else. But my father-in-law's plane. His fail-safe was set to be like half throttle or something when the transmitter signal was lost, and it tried to jump on the table when that happened, when I turned the transmitter off. So yeah, I've now with his plane, I know I unplug it. Like mine, I don't necessarily think about, but I've been trying to do a better job of shutting everything down, and being mindful to not have a prop on when I'm testing on the table. But I mean, I don't always take it off myself. I try to be mindful, but it's just, this served as a reminder, and it's unfortunate. And it's one of those situations where all we can say is, do as we say, not as we do. Like, be smarter than us in this situation, because
that's why we talk about half these things on the show.
Yeah, I mean, it's a look.
It's because, it's like, oh man, I'm a dummy. Hey, if anybody else can learn from what I just did wrong, please learn and don't make that mistake. So that's part of why I'm okay with bringing it up. Now, that's going to be a little bit before I get, I'll be able to look back and laugh a little bit. It's still very fresh, but it's okay. I mean, I think, the world will move on and I'll be okay. I can, I have normal color, movement, and feeling in the finger. So I think that's all good. So I don't think it cut any tendons. It didn't cut any, whatevers. So I think we're
without
okay.
going into too much detail on that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I just know that some people have been through and are like, oh my God, did you sever this or do that? And I'm like, well, thankfully I didn't. So anyway, so let's talk about other things because that pretty much brings, that's pretty much what I took care of this week. I was hoping to get out and fly that Prandtl today, but it just started raining all day today. And so I didn't really pursue getting the Prandtl ready. And until just now. Anyway, so that said, let's move on to talk about the build night.
Okay.
So for the build night, I did a little bit of preparing the Prandtl D, so I did some of the ironing, and I worked on the J1000. So I had the boots ready, and basically during that whole thing, I put together the 80-inch wingspan wing that I had set the spar, and I had the pieces, but I hadn't glued it and glued the clamshell closed and figured out how I was going to put in the rudder and then how I was going to anchor the flying stabilizer, and as well as the rudders. So I was able to kind of work through that really quick. And honestly, so by the time we were done talking to everybody, and what a great, man, that was so much fun. It was a good time just talking to everybody who showed up and seeing what everybody's working on. And then, just kibitzing about things that have been going on with each other and with the hobby. And as always, this is a good time. So, but anyway, so what do we have? When are we planning on doing this next time?
I think you were talking about Friday, the 18th of June, doing another one.
Yeah. I think that might work out. At least it should work out for me. And I think you said that right now it looks like it might be open, but you held reservations, right?
Only because I know my wife and I are trying to find, she has expressed interest in going camping. And
nice.
This past Monday for Memorial Day, my sister and I went out fishing, and we hit the river, and come to find out they've got some nice little cutouts along the river where people have cleared little camping spots. So my wife and I may decide to grab the boat and throw some camping equipment and take a night on the river. So as is, she and I haven't tried to set up a schedule for that yet, but I know you're wanting to go ahead and get a build night set up. So if we decide to go this month, that's probably going to be the prime time for us.
Okay.
But we'll,
right.
we'll have one. It might, if I'm not out of town, then I'll be here.
Yeah, you may not be able to make it. That's okay. And then I think we are tentatively setting one for the 26th on Saturday, kind of a midday, maybe 12 to 2, for our European audience. For those who can, or for anybody who finds that that's a better time. I know it's a lot harder for those on the West Coast, of America, but it is a lot better for some who are on the East Coast, and they have, they're just kind of starting their day, and their kids are running around, and they're like, well, I got a couple hours before we get into the serious stuff in that later half of the day. So anyway, so look for announcements and events in Facebook and our Discord community. If you're not part of it, get on board and join us in there. We talk about the hobby all the time, every day. I don't think there's a break.
There's really not. We have a couple quiet days, but generally it's guys.
Is somebody talking about what they're doing?
I think the only other thing we were talking about beforehand, and this is just sort of a habit on the radar. You and I discussed about maybe trying to get a sim night put together. So not a whole lot to be said there, other than I currently have Phoenix RC. I don't have Real Flight, but Phoenix RC version 6 has the ability to do multiplayer rooms, if you will. So we've gone in and flown together. So we're toying with the idea of setting up a night for anyone to join in on a room that we're in, and we all fly together and sim it up. So you can keep an ear to the ground on that one and work on go out if you're interested. Go out and grab the Phoenix RC files so you can get those installed, and you may need a special in between software. Yeah, I know you talked about dongles before. Mine ended up working if I got an emulator to run alongside my transmitter for when it plugged into the computer. So.
Yep. So listen to our simulator episode. I'm trying to figure out which one that is. But in the show notes for that are links to the Phoenix RC. Though there's a gentleman who's put together a website that kind of hosts the software and then upgrades the software so that you can start simming together. So take a look at there. If you have any questions, you can reach out to us. We'll see if we can answer it. It's not our software, so we'll do our best, which may not be good enough, but so I'm going to make that claim there. Other than that, we'll try to help you.
Yep. So we'll have more information about that in another episode or two as Matthew and I figure out how we want to do that. All right. Anything else?
No, I think that's it for this time. Why don't we let's get back and talk to Red some more.
All right. Well, here's the continuation of our conversation with Red Jensen, and afterwards we'll come back to talk about our workbenches for the next little bit.
The one, there have been a bunch of things like that, but early on in the Prandtl program, when I first got there, it had a big nose boom that stuck out of it and a bunch of nuts that were threaded on as nose weight, and like 1.5 pounds of nose weight.
I saw that. I was wondering exactly what that was. I was like, is that like an air pitot tube, or is that?
It was
a lot of junk on it.
So the guy who was flying it before me, he's like, hey, we had this thing tumble. CG is really critical. There's a whole other story I can talk to you about CG if you want to get into that, about how Prandtl's different than a normal plane with CG. But
we're going to talk about Prandtl right after, like as we finish what we're talking about here.
Cool. So anyway, the guy that was piloting it before me, he was just he's an RC pattern guy, great pilot, completely competent, but wasn't plugged into the program. Like, he wasn't there every step of the way. He didn't build the vehicles. He was just the pilot, right? So he, for my first flight op was with Prandtl, like 2 weeks on the job. And when I got there, the plane was broken, and I'm talking to Al Bowers, who's he was the guy that the brains behind the whole thing and the driving force.
He's a chief engineer.
Yeah, he's retired now, but
yeah.
Anyway, I'm like, Al, I don't understand. I don't understand why this thing flies without a vertical tail. I don't get that. But if it's capable of flying, I can fly it. And can I fix this? And I see a bunch of stuff that's wrong. It had, crappy hinges on it, and the linkage sucked, and just all this stuff. I'm like, model airplane guy, I can fix all that. Yeah. So he said, yeah, go ahead. So I fixed
let me pimp your ride.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what happened. So we go out to fly the thing, and the other pilot's there, and he's got a switch on the transmitter. And he's like, the switch has 2 presets. You have 10 degrees of up elevator preset, and then you have 5 degrees of up elevator preset. And you need all this preset because, if the CG is too far back, it tumbles. And so now the CG is where it can fly, but it needs all this up elevator. And so I turned to Al,
right,
and I'm like, Al, this doesn't compute to me. If you need all that up elevator, you're nose heavy. And he's like, well, I know, but, Jerry says this, and it's flying, and we've tried to fly it before, and it tumbled because it was tail heavy. And I'm like, okay, so Jerry flew it. I saw it fly. I'm like, at least fly the plane once so I can see it fly, and then I'll take over.
Right. Let me know what I can expect.
Yeah, and so we did that, and so then I flew it, and I flew it probably maybe 6 times that day, and with these same presets, you'd have to launch with full up elevator, and then plus the preset, and then you'd come back around. It would never fly with the elevons fared. So we're back in the lab, and I'm talking to Al, and I'm like, Al, this I don't know why this works. I don't understand the theory. All I can tell you is from a pilot's perspective that I will go to my grave saying that this airplane is nose heavy and it is not flying in trim. Those elevons should be fared. If the twist is right,
By fair, do you mean basically level with
yes.
the direction of flight?
Yeah.
Right?
So in level flight, the elevons are kicked up a minimum of 5 degrees, sometimes 10 degrees, right?
Yes.
So he said, well, I believe you. So, I said, I don't know what's going on before I got here. I don't understand, but I'm telling you, this airplane is massively nose heavy and it flies like it's massively nose heavy. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a bungee launched airplane. It weighed
Yep.
about 15 pounds. You'd get about 45 seconds of flight. So you'd take off, come off the
Mm-hmm.
bungee, do a 180-degree turn downwind, and then you would
Yep.
do your maneuvers. In this case, it was a roll pitch roll doublet, and a doublet is we're going in the weeds here. That's cool though.
That's fine with me.
A doublet is a square wave input, which means you go full left roll, or in this case, right roll, full left roll, and back to neutral. But those inputs are exactly timed the same. So it's if for instance,
Uh-huh.
if it takes 1 second to go to full right roll, you hold it for a second, then it takes a full second to go to left roll, you hold it for a second, and you come back to neutral for a second. And what that does is it upsets the aircraft and you measure the dynamic response. So we do a roll doublet, a pitch doublet, and then a roll doublet, and then it was time to land. We come back around. So one circuit of the airfield and
Okay.
about 45 seconds. So I convinced Al, we got it back flying. Everything was cool. It was fixed. It was flying well. He'd got the data that he'd wanted. And I'm like, Al, I want to play with CG. He's like, okay, but the reason this was broken is because we tumbled it before. Okay, I understand.
I
I'm just
appreciate
asking
that.
you to indulge me. So we went out. It was the next day or 2 days later or whatever it was, and I took 1.5 pounds of lead off the front of that aircraft, like
Oh man.
one nut at a time, and then
Jeez.
I'm like, it didn't make any difference. I'm taking 2 nuts off, and then 3 nuts, and then 5 nuts, and then so finally we got to where that whole rod out the front was naked, no nuts on it, and then we were cutting the rod back. So it went from 45 seconds of flight time with 5 to 10 degrees of elevator deflection to 2 minutes or so of flight time with the elevons completely fared, and I was having to circle the field because I had to bleed off altitude to come back and
Yeah.
land. So those are one of those things that, like, trust your gut, trust your ability and trust your instincts. I knew that airplane was nose heavy, and I knew that it
Yeah.
could fly better than it did, and Al was like blown away. He was like, I cannot believe
Yeah.
this.
He's like,
Like,
you just almost double and a half time how much stuff we get to do.
yeah. So in 2 days, this was the still the first aircraft that was built prior to when I got there. In 2 days, we doubled the flight time and what they had gotten the previous 4 years in the entire
Oh wow.
program. So obviously, he was ecstatic. I was happy because, hey, I helped. I did something
Yeah.
good. And that from that day forward, it was a fantastic collaboration and synergy between myself and Al and a few other folks that were there to make that thing be as successful as it was. But
Nice.
yeah, it was really cool. So again, I can't point to one gadget that I say I've invented or put in or anything like that. I think it's just really an overall mindset of how to operate these
It's
things in a safe and efficient manner.
And well, like you had mentioned earlier, is properly trim the plane. Get it to where it's
It matters.
happiest.
It absolutely
Yeah,
matters.
makes a
In this
difference.
case, it more than doubled the per flight time, and we're able to get
Yeah.
2 to 3 times as much data per flight. So less risk for the vehicle because every flight is a risk, right? And
Mm-hmm.
higher quality data. So it was
Yeah.
a win in every respect.
That's awesome. All right. So
Well,
we've
real real
Go
quick,
ahead.
you were saying that it had been tumbling before. Did you ever discover what had been causing it to tumble
Yeah, so
when the weight was missing?
we can head down that path. So it was tumbling because it was tail heavy, so extremely tail heavy, and without a tail, the aircraft they tend to spin like they're on an axle, um,
Right.
kind of like a tumble-wing glider, if you know what that is.
It
Ironically,
will roll back over. Yeah.
yeah, Edwards Air Force Base is named after Captain Glenn Edwards, who died in the YB-49 flying wing crash that tumbled all the way to the ground, took his life and a few others with it. So, um, a phenomenon I was familiar with, but I didn't understand how the Prandtl span load related to that. So,
Mm-hmm.
as far as CG ranges go, on a typical airplane with a reasonable static margin, your CG range is somewhere between like 25 to 33 to 35% MAC, which is mean aerodynamic chord. So if you take the average length of the wing from leading edge to trailing edge, even if it's tapered, somewhere in there along the span is going to be the MAC, the mean aerodynamic chord. And then you set your CG at about 30% roughly of that, and that's a reasonable starting point. This aircraft at anything aft of about 15% will tumble. And so
Wow.
by traditional MAC calculations, it's incredibly nose heavy.
Is that because of the 8%? Again, we'll get to it in a second. Is that because the what is about half the plane is at 8% angle of attack, as opposed to a traditional airplane is usually what, about 2 to 4%?
Sort of. What it has to do with, and we're going to get again into the weeds here a little bit, and this is going to take a little bit to explain.
Now might be a really good time to just say, let's talk about what a Prandtl D wing is, who Prandtl is,
Sure.
what was the phenomenon discovered in the 30s, why was it ignored, that kind of deal, and then kind of go, okay, now back to our regularly scheduled program.
All right. So that's a great segue, because it's going to tie into what I was going to talk about anyway. So,
Okay, good, because just there's a history there that I
yeah.
think if you're a listener who's heard nothing about this, it'd be really helpful to understand why we keep talking Prandtl D, Prandtl D, Prandtl D.
So Prandtl D is an acronym. It's preliminary research aerodynamic designed to lower drag, something like that. It's one of the NASA whatever, they had to make it fit. But Prandtl was a person. Ludwig Prandtl was a German mathematician, and he lived in Germany. And brilliant guy, theoretical mathematician, so not much practical stuff. He did a lot of stuff on paper, but he didn't do many experiments. He is the guy that wrote an equation that we now know as lifting line theory. And this equation is the very first equation in history that would allow you to predict the performance of a wing. So now that you have a tool to analyze the performance of a wing, you can now design with intent, right? You can say, I want to have a wing that does this. You can use this tool to analyze that wing and design to it.
And predict its behavior.
He's also the first guy to identify wingtip vortices. He called them vortex ribbons, and what it is, it's a mixing of the air. So as an aircraft flies through the air from the center of the wing travels spanwise out to the wingtip, and you've got a high pressure underneath and a low pressure relative on top. When they get off the end of the wing, the high pressure pushes up and it causes a curling, and that creates a tip vortice, or a vortex ribbon is what Prandtl called them. That's why every airliner that we see running around has a winglet on the end of it. That's another NASA invention, by the way. Dr. Richard Whitcomb invented that in 1976, I think it was. At any rate, so Prandtl developed this lifting line theory, and what the object was is to design a numerically perfect wing. Gives you even downwash behind the wing. So all the air that's displaced downward is even behind the wing.
So that you can easily design the structure behind it and things like that, right?
Least amount of drag for a given amount of lift. So
okay.
So what that says
Okay.
is if you were
Totally
to
different.
plot the load of a wing, if you're looking at a wing, edge on from the trailing edge or leading edge, however you want to look at it, if you were to plot the amount of work or the amount of load that the entire wing has to carry, it is in the shape of a quarter of an ellipse. So starting from the center line of the wing out to the wing tip, it's the shape of a quarter of an ellipse. That's the most efficient way to design a wing. That's how every college textbook to this day teaches you how to design a wing. You want an elliptical span load and even downwash, or elliptical span load will give you even downwash. Now that doesn't mean elliptical shape like a Spitfire, because you can achieve elliptical
No.
span
Right.
load through any number of ways. Planform is one of them. There's also twist, other things. All right, so that was like in 1921 or 22.
20.
Prandtl
Yeah.
did this, right? Well, in 1933 or so, he starts thinking about it, and he theorizes that his lifting line theory works if you treat the wing as a 2G object. In other words, there's no structure involved. So he starts thinking, is there an alternate span load that allows you to have the same root bending moment, the same strain at the root, right, where the wing is trying to carrying the lift, that gives you a greater reduction in drag, and as long as you integrate structure, right? Because the wing has to weigh something. It can't just be a 2D thing that doesn't just exist on paper, right? Every wing has to carry a load. So he theorizes it, and he writes this paper where he comes up with the non-elliptical lift distribution, or bell-shaped lift distribution, and he publishes it, and it's like 4 pages or so, something like that, and
Yeah.
it's
It's really
very
short.
thin, like 11 equations. It's published in a German-only soaring magazine, so it's kind of like an afterthought. Hey, we need some filler, and he drops at that point. He never ever does anything with it after that. Around the same time, the Horton brothers are doing their magic with the flying wings, and they're sort of stumbling on the same sort of uh, alternate span loads, and they achieve it a little bit differently than Prandtl theorized. Prandtl theorized doing it all with twist. The Hortons do a combination of twist and planform. So
Yeah.
it's largely forgotten by the majority of the aeronautical world and aeronautical wisdom, and it's sort of brushed off as kind of crackpot type stuff. It turns out there are 2 typos in one of his equations, and they were discovered early on. Turns out they cancel each other out, so it ends up working out. But not many people really dug into this thing. There have been a few that have gotten kind of pieces of the puzzle, but Al really deserves the credit for bringing all of this theory together and doing an experiment that actually proved that it works. So
Right.
with
Right. It was. I think what I remember hearing his talks was, it. What he mentioned was, it had been talked about, but nobody actually tested it.
that's right.
Like, everybody looked at it and said, "Yeah, that might work,"
Yeah.
but nobody went and just
Well,
did
there
something
were
with it to test
tons
it.
of clues around, right? There are a lot of different researchers that had little pieces of the puzzle, and but Al really kind of unified it all together. And
Yeah, he did.
so what ends up happening is with this bell-shaped span load is instead of a quarter of an ellipse, the lift starts a little bit lower in the center, and then it gradually builds as it comes out, and then it tapers off a little more abruptly, and downwash turns into upwash out near the wingtip at about 3/4 span. So with an elliptical span load, again, you're aiming for all perfectly even downwash behind the wing, and with a bell span load, it's kind of like a sine wave. So it's greater in the middle, and then downwash turns into upwash on the outer portion of the
At the end, yeah.
wingtip. Now, why that's important? You get a lot of things out of this. Um, One of the things you get is a reduction in drag with a control surface deflection. So the vertical tail was invented by the Wright brothers. very early on, their experiments like the 1901 and 1902 gliders didn't have a vertical tail, and they finally figured out, hey, we need this vertical tail, because they encountered a problem called adverse yaw. And if you're not familiar with adverse yaw, it's when you have, in this case, they use wing warping, but ailerons do the same thing. Your downward deflected aileron makes more drag than your upward deflected aileron, and that's because of how an airfoil makes lift, right? You have relative high pressure on the bottom, low pressure on top. So the downward side is creating more drag because it's in higher pressure than the upward side in lower pressure. Sailplane guys and guys that are really into fine-tuning their airplane use something called differential, where you have the upside aileron traveling more than the downside aileron. That's to counter adverse yaw. So what happens is you give a right roll input, but the nose swings left. So it's not coordinating the turn. So the Wright brothers called this well digging, where they would roll the airplane and it would kind of slide off in the opposite direction and crash. So they invented the vertical tail.
Because it basically rolls out of the turn.
Yeah.
And with that also comes the potential for stalling.
That's right.
Correct?
So
when that happens, you're really in bad shape.
So you would roll one direction and it would yaw the opposite direction, and it would slide off sort of towards the wingtip and hit, wingtip first edgeways kind of down into the ground. So by using the non-elliptical lift distribution, you get a reduction in drag with your downside aileron, and you actually get a little bit of induced thrust because the way the wing is twisted, the lift vector is rotated a little bit forward. It's very similar to a winglet. It's just a different implementation. It's kind of like a flat winglet.
Yeah, because if you're not aware, like if you're a listener and you're not aware, the winglets are little wing planforms, right? And they're slightly twisted. What is it? Inward. The trailing edge is twisted inward towards the fuse, and so therefore the thrust vector is forward on the winglets. Is that true?
Mostly, yeah. It basically you're controlling.
And it's only by a couple degrees.
You're controlling the wingtip vortice and making it. All that energy in that spiraling tip vortex is drag, right? You have to. The wing has to put enough energy into the air to make that spiral, and that's inefficient. So the looser and larger the vortice is, the lower energy it is, the more efficient the wing is performing. So the winglet is there to capture some of that, and it makes them think they've got the wing thinks it's a longer span wing than it is. So now with the alternate span load, you roll right, and then now since you get that little thrust from the downward side elevon, so instead of dragging the tip back, it's actually pushing it forward. Now you get automatically coordinated turns, and you don't need a vertical tail. So that's one of the biggies. You also don't have a problem of tip stalling. You hear folks talk about a tip stall, and really it's an uncoordinated stall is what it is. But since the wings are not contributing as much lift, because again the downwash turns into upwash at the wingtips, right? So the wingtips aren't contributing to lift like they normally would. You don't get sharp tipped wings aren't a problem. You don't get this roll off from a tip stall. But that non-elliptical span load is exactly why the CG traditional CD methods don't work. And I remember vividly the day that we discovered this. Al and I used to carpool together, and we'd always talk about whatever, mostly airplane stuff, but whatever on the hour ride in and the hour ride out. So we're going to work one day, and we're talking about this CG problem. Like we know where to put the CG to make it fly right, but why is that so different than a traditional airplane? Because we knew
why
that,
is it 10% forward, right?
Yeah, we knew that it flies correctly, right? We know it's not tail heavy, we know it's not nose heavy because it's hitting its design point. The control surfaces are flared. You can tell by the way it flies that it's performing correctly. But it's at like 14.5%, whereas a normal airplane should be, 28 or 30%. Why is it so far forward? And, we're discussing it. And finally, Al realizes that, well, if you have this non-elliptical span load, the whole wing geometrically is not contributing equal lift like it would be
Right.
an elliptical span load, right? So the outer portion of the wing isn't doing as much of work as the inner portion of the wing. So
Right.
geometrically, when you've got a very wide center chord and a very narrow tip, your mean aerodynamic chord actually, if it's based on span load and not by geometric, lines, it's going to move inward,
Mhm.
which by virtue moves your
Right.
CG. So that's why the CG is not the same. Now, one thing that we have never done is we never got to the point where we could have a tool or a rule of thumb that says here's where you should put the CG on a Prandtl span loaded wing. Now we calculate it for each particular wing, but like you can show me any airplane with a tail on, I say, well, put the CG at 28%, it's going to fly, right? We're not there yet
Yeah. Yeah.
with the Prandtl wings. That's more research to be done.
Now, have you looked at different? Obviously, the Prandtl D that we see in all the videos, it's a very, I'll call it a fat center chord, and it's really thin at
It's
the wingtip. It
that's
comes
a
to almost
Horton
nothing.
that's a
It's a
Horton
Horton.
10C, and the reason it is that is because Al liked that plan form. That's the only reason.
It,
There's
okay,
he liked the
and so
shape.
so going to this thicker wing shape, as long as I've got the twisting proper and the wing shape along its length correct, and that the inner half is like a Clark Y, not exactly, but it's close to a Clark Y, and the outer is symmetrical, and it's twisted from let's see, the intersection is like 8% to 7.5%. And like you said, it twists up a little bit and comes back down. And
Yep.
it goes from 7 to -2 from the middle to the outer portion. If those are correct, it doesn't matter how thick the cord is, it's that twisting action across the length of the wing that's creating that planform, the bell-shaped planform lifting.
Maybe. So
We hope.
well, yeah. So we haven't developed a tool that will allow you to apply that twist. I mean, you can apply it to any wing shape, but it's a different twist progression based upon the geometric constraints of the wing. So I will say it's probably close. Is it perfect? Probably not. But it will probably fly. So that's part of the
Yeah.
research that's lacking. We haven't developed this whole tool that'll allow you to take
Right.
whatever wing shape you come up with and figure it out. So taking the twist schedule from a Prandtl D and applying it to, let's say, like a Prandtl M, they're absolutely different.
Yeah.
So
Oh, are they?
it's
Okay.
it's
I
going to
didn't
be
know.
it's
I
going to
haven't
be
looked at the Prandtl M.
it's going to be experimental. You're gonna have to try it. And I wish I could give you better direction than that, but do that
That's okay.
and you'll know. You'll see.
Yeah, exactly. I'll be curious to see how it goes. It hopefully it'll have more success, and I'll go back and also build the Prandtl D that I have the plans for, and see if, because I know, I'm trying to remember if how well I documented where the CG was when I found it, because you'll look in the maiden toss video. We toss, no, really close, and then and it goes straight across the whole lawn. I'm like,
Right.
perfect. Okay,
Awesome.
that's where it is. Now let's attach a motor and put some weight on there, and then see if I can't get that to balance. That's what I was trying to do, and I threw it in heavy headwind, and it basically just did a big giant loop, because I couldn't get enough control authority.
So
But
thrust line is a big deal on these. So make
yeah,
sure that your thrust line is through the vertical CG, which most people don't even think about. Depending on how your airplane is built, your vertical CG could be outside the center section of the airplane. It could be higher than that. So make sure that your thrust line is at least pointed generally. So you're going to want the motor angled down a little bit in the back is what it amounts to. So
I got you. Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, if the wing is at positive 8%, I'm roughing it. I can't remember what the schedule is. Then that means the angle would be like -2 or 3 incident into that 8%.
yeah, so
It'd be about a 10 degree from
delta.
actually, yeah, delta. And that's not even quite correct, because the top of the planform is coming around at a couple degree angle too.
So that's the problem,
probably
is
more than
there's
12
no
or
straight
13.
lines on this aircraft except for the hinge line. So, where do you set the
No.
zero? You talk about incidents and things like that in a traditional airplane. It's all over the
Right, you
place.
can't.
So, in a level flying attitude, you're gonna the center of the plane's gonna be down a little bit, and then it's gonna kind of come up, and then the wingtips are gonna be pointed back down. You just want a little bit of down thrust in it.
Mhm.
So try that.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I'll do that. Okay, sorry. I was so engrossed in the conversation, I forgot we have an interview to talk about. It sounds to me like we've kind of covered, I think, enough about the Prandtl D where anybody who didn't know about it now knows probably more than they thought they wanted to know. So one of the things I'm thinking about is, so what you're saying is every new plan form of a Prandtl D, you'd have to recalculate the twist to match that plan form. Is that
That's right. Yeah,
correct understanding?
they'll all be slightly different.
Okay. How did anybody test that directly, or
Well, we did sort of, but not in a way that would allow us to make a blanket statement that if this, do that.
oh, right,
We
sure,
we built
nothing prescriptive.
That's right, and so the Prandtl M's really kind of drove that home because they're much lower aspect ratio, so the twist distribution is a little bit different airfoils, all that kind of stuff. So
Okay, well, let's talk about the Prandtl M then. What is a Prandtl M? What does that mean?
So the M is just a derivative of the same Prandtl aircraft, but the M stands for Mars. So the M aircraft were all smaller. The regular Prandtl's, the Prandtl D project, was two 12.5-foot airplanes and two 25-foot airplanes. And the Prandtl M's started out as, I want to say, 32-inch span, maybe 34, all the way down to 13-inch span.
Oh, wow.
13-inch. I'm wrapping my head around, like, that's a really thin.
So
it's really small. Okay,
you talked about the tape measure aircraft, right? So those those initially were the Prandtl D, same geometry, same twist distribution, everything, just shrunk down to 24 inches. Because we knew then that if we changed the wing plan form, that the twist distribution would change as well.
Okay.
We knew
so to not have to do new work.
That's right. We knew that shape worked, so we wanted to just build a small one and see what it did. And it turns out they actually flew pretty well, really well actually. The problem is that they shrunk so much that there was no room for payload or control system. The root chord is like 2 inches and the tip is like 3/4 of an inch or something, so you couldn't get anything meaningful. That was my idea though for the tape measure thing. That was me.
So basically the tape measure, what I'm talking about is instead of having a full plan form, using an undercambered wing,
single surface
to do. Yes, exactly, and to do all the lifting, but because like a tape measure, you can roll that up in one direction, you can make it far more compact, right? That was the.
Yeah, so
I saw you hold it in the interview with Flight Test Community Cast. You're like, check it out, and you had one in your hand, and you rolled it up into like, I don't know, what was it, a silver dollar size?
Yeah, about 1.5 inch circle.
And it was like, what? And you just like let it go, and boink, it's now ready to go fly.
Yeah, so the idea with that is we knew early on that space was going to be at a premium, packing space on the rocket to Mars. And our whole idea is that we wanted to replace the nose ballast in the rocket as, payload. Just like any airplane that needs usually lead on the nose to CG it, you have to do the same thing with a rocket. So they usually put tungsten or lead behind the nose cone. They call it the air shell. And we wanted to replace some of that ballast with experiments. So we theorized that using a cube satellite enclosure, which is kind of like a Lego satellite enclosure. They make them certain sizes, and they have all standard interfaces and things like that. And whatever you can shove inside and hook up to all the interfaces, that fits in a standard ejector rack. And so we thought we had much more of a chance of having a standardized interface to go on board the rocket than having some weird experimental thing that they had to make allocations for
Custom. Yeah,
custom.
yeah.
So we thought, if we have this thing that fits in a known space, hey, can we just hitch a ride, and we're not going to disturb you. Basically, we're our own power, our own packaging, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
So
just
yeah,
holding out your thumb. Come on.
yeah. So the tape measure idea came to me from thinking about packaging. I'm like, how can we take this 2 foot long span thing and put it in a 4-inch cube um, efficiently enough to have everything in there, and then it would eject into space and fly down to the Martian atmosphere. So I came up with that tape measure idea, and it worked. It worked really well. The planes were
Dude, that
plenty
thing,
rigid.
that worked great.
We had to do some tailoring with the composites. I had to mess with the composites a little bit to get the strength in the right place to keep it from twisting when we didn't
Okay.
want it at relatively higher air speeds. But yeah, that
Uh
that
huh.
was that was my solution to the packaging problem before we changed the shape of the aircraft.
That was a brilliant idea, honestly.
I
Um,
can't I can't take
uh,
full credit for it. I saw it somewhere, or at least the concept. So I just ran with it.
sure. Well, I mean, it's where all good ideas come from. Other ideas, you're like, I could use that. I'm gonna change it, but that's a perfect start. So
Mm-hmm.
that was definitely, I don't know. It was one of those mind blowing moments. You're talking about how Joe's like, what the heck? That was one where, and I saw that, I was like, oh my god, that's genius. So a 24-inch plane would have worked on Mars, because I know the atmospheric density is completely different. It's what, a tenth
1%.
or a 1%. So
Yep.
Wow.
you're
But gravity is also lower too.
right. So right, you don't have the payload is effectively less, but you're getting. Yeah, I thought it was calculated. Was it like a third effectiveness? Is
So
it?
we did a bunch of theorizing and did some calculations and stuff. And what we sort of the design space we sort of targeted was about 40 knots indicated uh, atmosphere speed. You can't say airspeed. There's no air, right?
Sure.
And
Right.
what it turns out that the atmosphere is so thin that the true airspeed of the vehicle, the true speed it was moving, the velocity was like 400 miles an hour, but it was only indicating 40. So that's kind of the design
Wow.
space we were in. Um, Gets us a long range. When it deploys, you get a lot of coverage for your ground
Right.
survey mapping, things like that. But the
Mm-hmm.
the vehicle ends up flying in this very, very tiny corner of the envelope, where if it goes too slow, it stalls. If it goes too fast, it becomes dynamically unstable and comes apart. So we kind of had to hit this sort of sweet spot to try to make it work, and that's why the plan form changed so much, because we needed enough area to get the wing loading to be light enough so that would
Mm-hmm.
fly and still carry all the required guidance package and all that sort of stuff. So
Right. Yeah.
again, aviation is all about compromises. There is no one perfect design, no matter what anybody
No.
tells you.
Right.
So when the plan form changed, we also changed airfoils, we changed twists, we played with sweep, we played with dihedral, we played with control surface sizing, we played with the um, mass distribution for the MOI, moment of inertia thing. So we did quite a bit on the M. The D project, it was fairly stable for the same design that what we built for the two 12.5 footers. The only thing we changed on the 25 footers was the um, shape of the control surfaces. I wanted more area for ailerons because it was slow and roll, and we changed the twist by 1 degree. That was it.
Oh wow. So I saw something that looked like it was a Prandtl D glider, hang glider. Was that a 50-foot?
Yeah, so that's a whole other project. So a friend of mine, Eric Chase, down here in Tehachapi, they have this thing called the Experimental Soaring Society's Western Workshop, where guys that build home built, piloted sailplanes, they gather once a year and they, share all these things that they do. And it's a great bunch of guys, experimenters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Al was a featured speaker for years. You're talking about Prandtl stuff. And so I went and there's a guy in the audience, and I'm like looking at him. I'm like, I know that guy. Is that my friend Eric? And because he lives 500 miles away, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's Eric. So I'm like, dude, that's Eric. So I go and talk
I
to
know
him.
that guy.
Yeah, I know that guy. So I'm talking to him, and I knew him from, I've known him for 20 years, airplane buddy of mine. So I'm talking to him. I'm like,
Yeah.
what are you doing here? He's like, oh, well, I'm into the sailplanes or whatever. And he says, I've been following this Prandtl thing, and I'm really interested in it. And I said, well, do you want to meet Al? And I'm flying it. What do you want to know? So we got to talking, and he decided he wanted to build a man carrying, hang glider. Um, the dream still is. It's kind of dead now because we're all doing different things. But the intent was a
Sure.
foot launched sailplane to bring to market. He wanted to develop this thing and market it. So he's a composites guy by trade. He builds America's Cup type sailboat
I
parts,
was gonna
things
say,
like that.
yeah.
Very well known
I've,
guy, right, for that. So
yeah.
he builds a set of molds, and he molds this thing, and another RC buddy of mine named Steve Davey, hang glider pilot. He's like, I'll fly it. So they load it up and bring it down here, and we go out to El Mirage, and we fly the thing. And prior to that, he'd built a D model, basically the same size as the ones I was flying, but I think he had a motor on it. I can't remember. But they were having massive problems with controllability. It had bad adverse yaw, and of course I wasn't there, so I couldn't look at it or go fly it. And they had poor video, and so we were thinking, was it the hedral, or something is wrong. So finally, I just told him, start putting nose weight in it and just throwing it until it flies like it should. So he did that, and it ended up taking 6 or 8 ounces or a pound of nose weight, whatever it was. And he called
And
me
it
up and
brought
was
that
like,
CG to the 15% mark that you guys.
yeah, they were slightly back, and it was exhibiting the adverse yaw tendencies because the wing wasn't loaded properly. It was flying at too low of an angle of attack for the twist
Right.
distribution to work. And he called me up. He's like, it's a completely different airplane. It's flyable now. It'll fly anywhere. It's stable. So then, that gave him the confidence to finish the full scale one. And we flew it like, I don't know, 7 or 10 times that day on the lake bed, just arrow tows, or actually car tows. And
Yeah.
it hasn't flown since, unfortunately.
That was a great. Honestly, I'm so glad that whoever took the video brought it out to YouTube. Was that you? Is it?
Yeah.
Is it on your channel?
It's on my channel. Yeah.
Thank you so much for putting that up there, because that is really awesome to see, like the full scale Monty, and just watch it.
The funny thing was, it was my friend's GoPro that we used, and I've got ground footage and stuff too. But we didn't purposely put any footage out there because we're not done. We don't even know what we're doing. We just barely got this thing flying. We have nothing to brag about.
Right.
Nothing. There was many more steps to go, and lots of people were like, hey, I want to see it. I want to see it. I want to see it. I'm like, okay. So, I showed the footage, and yeah, it's I hope to be back involved in that, and someday. That guy Eric is now working on some molds for me for my Formula One planes. So we've stayed in touch this whole time,
nice.
but
Good.
yeah, really really neat stuff. It's one of those things. It's like there's not enough time in my life to do everything. I still try, but there's just so much stuff.
Yeah. Well, that is the nature of all the hobbyists, right? I think we all have that same issue. We're like, man, I wish there was more.
My problem is my interests are so wide and varied that I have to reel myself in. I just can't do it all.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Ingenuity is the current Mars mission. They're going on their 5th? They've done 5 heli missions so far. I know they're going on their 6th soon. Was Prandtl M? See, I always thought that Prandtl M was supposed to be what the heli rover turned into.
No,
right? I thought
the heli was always.
And I think I had it wrong.
The helis were always in front of us. We always knew that. We were targeting a 2024 or a 2026 mission. Was when
Okay.
It's a long development cycle. So, we've got the aero stuff mostly proved out, at least stable enough that we think it would work. There's still the whole payload guidance package, delivery system, space hardening of all that stuff. So it's a very, very difficult and long problem. And we're only, developing one small part of it, which is the aero. it would have had to been turned over to JPL to do the, maybe not the guidance, but at least implement the guidance and certainly space harden all the payload. So it was going to have,
Sure.
atmospheric sensors and cameras, and there was going to be a swarm of them, somewhere between
Yeah.
12 and 48 of them, something like that.
Yeah. So would it be something like a little nano cam or something like that, or is it like we're talking smaller than that?
Well, who knows? It was never clearly defined, and
Okay.
we always knew that we were always targeting, like 10 years from now it would be a viable sort of thing. So
Okay,
and
I
we
gotcha.
haven't we
That
haven't
makes
worked
sense.
on it for so
Okay.
yeah. So no, we knew the helicopter was going to beat us there. We wanted to be the first fixed wing, and we wanted to
Nice.
be deployed in the upper atmosphere as the vehicle was reentering, which very different from what the helicopter does.
Yeah, no, it's the way you originally described it. It sounded like a very different mission,
Yeah.
and that's kind of when I saw the helicopter. I'm like, oh man, did they just take a left turn, Clyde? Like what? What
No,
happened
they were in development long before we were.
there? Oh,
Long.
that's cool.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, it's definitely rejuvenated a lot of excitement, um, in the Mars mission in general.
Super
I think.
cool. Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, very cool. I'm gonna take a second to just go over some of the other experimental craft that were taken care of, I guess, or that was developed out at the Armstrong Flight Research Center.
Okay.
And I know that you probably didn't have too much to do with some of these, although it would be nice to hear, like, if some of this work, a lot of this work probably happened before you, but there's some
long
things in
history of
here
flight
that,
test there.
yeah, absolutely. You talked about the lifting body.
Yep.
Right. So that seemed to be what started off this whole journey for the research center here, and that was obviously something that eventually developed into the space shuttle.
Yeah,
which is
well,
basically,
before it was NASA, it was the NACA, the National Advisory Council
Mhm.
for Aeronautics, and then it was
Yep.
Muroc High Speed Flight Station. So they were doing research into the X-1 type stuff, right?
Yeah.
So that predates the lifting body stuff. But the lifting body is just I'm not going to say a footnote because it wasn't a footnote, but it was just
No.
there was a ton of stuff happening, and that was just one of
Yeah.
the things. And there were several different variations and iterations of it.
Right. And this is a Matt Allen curated list here, so
Cool.
it's not going to talk about the massive amount of supersonic testing that happened there, because there's, I'm going to start at X-31 because all the other X's are the supersonic flights where you like,
Yep.
is it even possible? Then like,
Right. How fast
what
can we go?
affects it?
Yeah.
yeah, and it's like, oh, how can we control it? This is crazy, and all this kind of stuff. So the X-31, I'm mentioning it because it had thrust vectoring. It was a testing of how thrust vectoring and how to maintain maneuverability while pitched up, was it 70 degree angle of attack.
Yep.
And still be fully maneuverable, which that's got to be some incredible stuff to see.
So I didn't have anything to do with that program, but there was a precursor that you may not know about called HIMAT, which is highly maneuverable advanced tactical aircraft or something like that, and it really did those post stall maneuvers prior to X-31.
Okay.
So that's an interesting one too. But I didn't have anything to do with that either, except for I get to look at it. It's out in front.
Yeah, those were most of these things were done. These first couple here were done in the 90s, I think, late 90s.
Yeah, HIMAT
I was graduating college
70s, 80s. Yeah.
Then the X-35 is a test of the tailless fighter idea. So can we get away without having a tail? And
there's a huge flaw in that. And how do you fly it engine out? Right. So
you can't because it's round and stuff. But there's a 28th scale remote piloted, and I guess the whole idea was to test. You wanted to reduce the radar signal.
Yep.
And called
RCS, radar cross section.
Yep. Yeah. And you're basically that was the reason why they wanted to get rid of the tails, I guess.
Yeah, vertical makes a huge signature.
I bet it does. Yeah. Because that's pretty much the only thing perpendicular to the radar itself, right?
Right.
And then of course you have then they took the same plane later and used the neural net algorithm restore to basically help but fail safe, I guess.
Yeah, it was redundant,
Basically,
redundant flight control system. So if kind of like a neural network, if a node failed, it could kind of, repair itself, sort of.
it could repath the signal so that
Yeah.
it could still get there,
Mhm.
which is that's got to be pretty instrumental in future development of any of these supersonic craft, right? Especially to make sure that even when things go wrong, it won't end in disaster, right? This next one blows my ever-loving mind, and it's the X-43A, and it is the first test of what a successful independent ramjet scramjet, which went
Yep.
up to Mach 9.6.
Yeah, we call it 10.
Ballister.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
Which you call what?
We just call it 10, Mach 10. It's easier to say.
It is Mach 10. So, but it's 6,800 miles per hour. If you're not really sure, they said they did that for 11 seconds or something.
11 seconds. It was very short.
Well, honestly, if you did it much longer, you'd go out of the country.
Right. Well, they didn't start in the country. They started over the water anyway. But, funny story.
I figured.
There were 3 of those vehicles built. They launched 2 of them. And Oscar Murillo, who I talked about earlier, Dr. Murillo, he was big on a concept called aerogravity assist, where it's an interplanetary problem where how do you get to Mars or wherever, for instance. And I'm probably going to butcher this. Orbital mechanics are not my thing at all, but
you'll do better at it than we will.
It takes a tremendous amount of energy and time to fling a spacecraft from here to Mars, right? So the idea is, could you? It's kind of like dynamic soaring in a way, and that you orbit a body. In this case, it would be like you go out around the moon, and you dip into the gravity well of the moon, and it would accelerate the vehicle and spit it back out the other side, and then you'd come back towards Earth on a trajectory that would take you into the atmosphere. And so as you're coming through the atmosphere, the aircraft would actually be upside down, and you're pulling G, trying to stay within the atmosphere as you follow the curvature of the Earth, and you accelerate again and end up getting spit out the backside, and on your way to wherever your destination is. That's called an aerogravity assist. Oscar was making a serious attempt to get that last X-43 into my lab so that we could do an aerogravity assist experiment. Never happened.
But
that was that close to messing with that.
Man, the wildest gravity slingshot of all time.
Right?
No, the wildest one was the one where Star Trek went back in time.
Somehow I knew you were going to go there.
Come on, I had to go there. How do you talk about gravity assist where you slingshot around stuff and not talk about Star Trek where they went back in time?
Fortunately, we're not approaching those speeds yet.
Not yet. Although we're getting close. I heard Mach 10 that we go back in time, right?
Got me. I don't know.
It's warp 10, dude.
That makes my head hurt.
Oh my God. By the way, so for a reference, from the farthest reaches of Maine to Southern California is 3,450 miles. It is a 9-hour flight,
right?
At least.
Yep.
They would cover that in 30 minutes.
Yep.
At Mach 9. I can't imagine how fast they're bleeding fuel, but we won't get into that. I would love to talk about ramjets and scramjets for a while because they're such a fascinating concept that everybody says is just not a viable solution to anything, and yet here it is, and it seems to
it's kind of I don't know a lot about it, but it's kind of a brute force solution. That's why the thing would only run for seconds at a time, and I've seen some concepts of engines that are not even fully enclosed, right? You only have to actually constrain half of the airflow. So you imagine like the bottom half of an aircraft. You can get enough compression to get ignition because it's going so fast that the rest can be free stream. That's all, big think tank stuff, well beyond my brain capacity, but it's interesting stuff for sure.
But I think, sadly, beyond the scope of our conversation today.
Today, we'll put a bookmark on that one.
Sure. All right, you got one more?
I got one more. All I was thinking on that last one is like, how in the heck do you build a wind tunnel that produces Mach 10 testing?
So
But anyway, or Mach 7.
you store a lot of energy, a lot of air. It's compressed, and the test section is very small compared to a giant volume of air, and it only happens
Okay.
for very, very brief periods of time.
Okay, thank you. That explains so much. And then the last one is one of probably the most current projects is X59, low boom
Yep.
test for
LBFD.
basically supersonic.
Yep.
Yep. It's a supersonic flight over land.
Yep.
So basically, to reduce the actual boom from like the window shattering current status that it's in, to reduce it to basically be a thud.
Yeah. So Edwards Air Force Base has the only terrestrial supersonic corridor currently in the United States. So there's nowhere else in the United States that you can go supersonic unless you're, responding to something. So Edwards has the only supersonic corridor. We hear booms all the time. So the LBFD is a pretty neat project where they're doing. It's not necessarily reducing the boom. It's still there, but they're shaping it and deflecting it in such a way that it won't be as offensive to folks on the ground.
It seems like they're redirecting it upward.
That's right. That's exactly what they're doing.
Okay.
So it's a lot like radar and sound. It's similar.
Yeah, just move it somewhere else.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got two topics that I don't know that we have time for. We probably don't have time for any of them, but do you want to talk about young pilots, STEM, and building future engineers, designers, and pilots? Or do you want to talk about the Reno Formula One racer? I know we'll probably cover both of these topics in our podcast, and I would love to have you back to talk about each one of them.
We can talk a little bit more, but I'll let you pick. I'm passionate about both of those things, so you pick.
Man.
Well, I will.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, even if we don't talk about it, intern.nasa.gov is the website where you can potentially be an intern for NASA.
Let's plan on doing the young pilot section here. So bringing it all back towards the very beginning of our conversations with you, and in getting into all this, when it comes to young pilots, even single digit age or teenage or even in the 20s, and I guess potentially even beyond, or anyone who's wanting to go into your kind of field where they're doing the flying or they're doing the testing, the design, the engineering. We're curious, like, what would go into that? What kind of skills would be beneficial to be learning to be able to gear yourself in that direction?
That's a tough one because, there currently is no college curriculum that prepares you to do exactly what I'm doing. There's pieces of it, obviously, but I would have to say that the one thing that's probably non-negotiable is the pilot skill stuff. And like the stuff that I fly, it doesn't take superhuman piloting, but you have to make the right decision every time. And it's that decision making that separates people that I hire and people that I never would. And it's hard to describe, but it's a mindset that not only are you responsible for that airplane, but you're also responsible for the research data and whatever associated costs there might be for that. Much more importantly than that, you're responsible for all the people around you, make sure that they don't get hurt. You're responsible for making sure that you can intermesh with the Air Force stuff that's flying around, and make sure that you're not going to be a danger to them. So ultimately, if the plane is flyable, you're expected to fly it no matter the situation. So if it departs or there's some sort of failure, if there is a chance that the vehicle is controllable, you are expected to do that because as pilot in command, you're responsible for the whole operation. So most of the time it's not a high workload most of the time. Sometimes it is. Flying, anybody that's been flying a reasonable amount of different types and things for 15 or 20 years, they could easily do the flying part of the job.
Mm-hmm.
Where I find that it breaks down is the critical thinking skills when something does go wrong, to either save the plane or save the experiment, or make sure nobody gets hurt. So that's probably the one thing that you can't really teach. It has to be earned the hard way through thousands of hours of flying.
Mm-hmm.
But they're an aero degree or an electrical degree, or any number of other things absolutely play a role, and those things can all be taught, given enough time. But I don't know if you guys know or not, but I did this the absolute hard way. I don't have one day of college education. I entirely self-taught.
Oh, wow.
I made it here through sheer will and passion, and as you heard earlier, I didn't even want to end up here. Right? It just sort of happened. So,
Right.
one of the things that I tell the younger folks that come through my lab, or I might see them at an air show or an event or something like that, is that what you really have to have to work at NASA is the desire to work at NASA. Really, it's really that easy. NASA's just a bunch of regular people. They're doing extraordinary things, but they're still just regular people. They're just surrounded by the tools and the framework to get that done. So, not everybody there is an aerodynamicist. Not everybody there is a rocket scientist. Not everybody there is a pilot. It takes every facet that you can imagine to work at NASA. And one of the games I like to play is I'll ask the kids that come in, and we get kids from grade school all the way, whatever through, is try to think of a job that NASA does not do, and think of it in the context of like working at the center. So if you're at my center, is there a job that you think that NASA doesn't do, or even NASA as a whole, it's the entire agency, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you guys can throw some out there if you want to, but kids come up with, well, veterinarian.
Yeah.
Well, we sent monkeys to space, right?
Right.
That's an easy one. Doctors, lawyers, but it goes well beyond that. Plumbers, architects, groundskeepers,
Yeah.
Motor pool. You name it. There's a place for everybody at NASA, and that's so whatever your hang up is, whatever your defect, whatever your passion, if that's something that you really love and you're really, really good at it, there's probably a place for you at NASA.
Right.
And within all that, you had told us NASA does internships, and you were telling us a link or a place if somebody was interested in trying to intern there that they could go.
That's right. It's intern.nasa.gov. Awesome. And as you can imagine, we get thousands and thousands of applications every year, and we can only take a few hundred. For me personally, I haven't had a dedicated lab intern in probably 3 years. That's mostly because there are other projects that have 10 or 12 interns, and they're all working in the lab anyway. It's tough to have a lab, such a varied skill set that it's tough to intern there, right? But that doesn't mean that they're not there and they're doing things. But in the folks that I have picked to be interns, I'll look at their resume, they get down selected, and I'll get a stack of 50 or something like that, and I'll pick one or sometimes two. And the things I look for are not the things that would get them traditionally into a NASA internship, right? I don't care what your grades are. If you've made it to my desk, your grades are good enough, right? You've obviously are the top of your game. I don't care about that. I look to the very last page, and I want to see model airplane experience. And if you got a kid that's had a couple of years even of model airplane experience, I'm going to have a kid that knows how to solder. He probably knows how to do a little bit of coding. He knows what dihedral is. He knows what incidence is. He knows what center of gravity is. So, to me, that's a huge head start over any college aero course or anything like that. So, for me personally, when I'm looking at folks to intern, I will for sure look at modeling experience over everything else.
Right. And it's basically like that gut understanding that you develop when you
It's a
try to get one of these stupid things in the air and fail
it's a
or
it's a
succeed.
level of
Yeah.
it's a level of understanding that some kids don't get till after they graduate, and some kids never get at all.
Yep.
So when you have the passion to do that on your own, and you're funding it yourself, and you
Yep.
feel that emotional torque when you wind the thing into the ground, but you pull it out and you figure out what went wrong and you fix it.
Mm-hmm.
Man, that's a huge head start for what I do. That doesn't work in the rest of the center
Right.
probably, but that's
From
that's what I look for.
maybe not. Yeah, but yeah, it's that there's a problem solving that's inherent with anything you do in this hobby. Like if you can't
Critical
problem
thinking.
solve or you're not interested in it, you're not going to stay with this hobby. If you love it and you're
That's right.
passionate about it, you're going to find yourself, like you said, you're going to be a good problem solver. You're going to have them, but you're going to be like, I want to do this. How do I make money to make this happen? It's not a, oh geez, I can't do it today. It's like, how am I going to do this today? Okay, it's raining. What can I do? So
Yep. You find a way. You have the desire
yeah, it's like,
to get
okay,
it
well,
done.
do I build do I build a waterproof aircraft, or do I sit and go, it's time to start designing something interesting, or whatever. The answer is never going to be maybe I should just do something else today. It's like no, I want to get back into this. I want to when the weather's good, I want to be full tilt.
Yep, absolutely.
Nice. Well, we at some point or another, we're gonna cover STEM in our thing, and I will at least call you up to see some questions in your. I personally have a passion about STEM, and I think we've run out of time for that today, but we will definitely have to get back into that. And
Sure, I'd
how
love to come back at some point.
sounds perfect because I'd love to hear how like what NASA's mission is with regards to STEM. Obviously, with regards to creating and developing minds who have a thirst for knowing more. Nothing seems to foster that I've seen more than like a STEM program, an active quality STEM program, and obviously NASA's invested in making that happen, right? So
Yep, absolutely.
I'd love to hear what NASA has and how you get involved and how we as hobbyists can help foster that in our community with NASA. But that'll have to be a different day. So all I can say
Great.
for our listeners is tune in. It'll be coming, I'm sure.
Some point in the future.
Yep. And then when we start getting into contests and full scale flight stuff, and I'm calling you up to see about the Reno Formula One racer for sure.
Sure.
I
Yep.
have so much I want to know about that. Oh,
Very
we're getting a
nice.
tour. Okay, so what
Very
was that
nice.
that you just showed me?
So that's the fuselage plug, and it's upside down.
Okay,
So it's sitting in cradles, and the gray is the plug itself, and then the black is
nice.
carbon fiber mold that I'm pulling off of each
Oh,
part.
beautiful. Nice. I thought that was like a.
Someday it might be.
All I'm going to ask you real quick. How far are you into the journey, and how long do you expect it to take before you
So
are in the air with it?
I hesitate to answer that because I don't know what I don't know, but I would like to think that there's a chance it could fly in late 22 or probably 23.
Okay.
I'm hoping to have the majority of the airframe built by the end of this year or early next year. That's kind of what I'm targeting. I've been, in a nutshell, I've been an air race fan. My first Reno was 1979. I've gone every year since, with the exception of like 3 total.
Nice.
Formula One I love because it's a design problem, right? They give you a box and you got to design an airplane to fit within the rules and go as fast as you can. I had this design sort of gestating over many, many, many years. I've only really been actively on it for about 5 years.
Okay.
And it wasn't until NASA that I realized that I could do it. And the big hangup was not the aero or not the building. It was making it strong enough that I wouldn't die,
Yeah.
and not that it wouldn't be too heavy where it would be uncompetitive. Because I'm absolutely making a serious attempt at the world the world record. I want to. I'm not going to participate. I'm going to kick everybody's ass if I can, and have a good time. So, those are my self-imposed limitations, and I couldn't do something just to participate. That's just how I am. Everything I do, I want it to be the best it can possibly be.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of how you make it to NASA, I imagine.
Yeah, yeah.
All right.
Well,
Joe,
we can't.
do you think it's time for the lightning round?
Yeah, we can't very well close it out without doing the traditional.
All right.
So, Red, we're going to run through a short list of questions, semi-rapid fire style, sort of a this or that kind of questionnaire, and you give us the first thing that comes to mind. You ready?
Okay.
Ready?
Nothing like being put on the spot. Yeah, let's go for it.
All right. Sit or stand? Okay, wait. Joe, what was that?
I should say these are in regard to flying, generally.
Generally. Not all, but close enough.
Go ahead, Matt.
Sit or stand?
Definitely stand. I tend to move around a little bit.
Pinch or thumb?
For sure, pinch. And I could go into a whole diatribe about why that's better, but it's just opinion. There's nothing real about it.
Okay.
All right. Spectrum, Radiomaster / Jumper, Futaba, or other?
I was JR forever. I'm Spectrum now, but I use Futaba as well. I don't whatever quality equipment I can get a hold of. It's all good equipment. It's all how the failures are from user mostly.
Micro, park, or giant scale?
Definitely micro. I've always had a soft spot for tiny airplanes. I have giant airplanes too, but I don't know. Little's neat.
Foam tack, hot glue, or epoxy?
Foam tack.
Snow, water, pavement, or tall grass?
Oh, that's a tough one. I want to say probably tall grass because that means I'm flying somewhere that's not a traditional flying field, usually on the slope somewhere.
Okay.
Ready to fly, almost ready to fly, kit, scratch, or RTR?
All the above, but mostly kit or scratch.
Okay. Monocoat, fiberglass, exotics, or foam?
I would say, boy, that's a tough one. I monocoat and fiberglass.
Okay.
But I have foam stuff too, and whatever. I like it all, but I traditionally design in the traditional methods, so wood and covering, and with just like this yellow plane behind me, fiberglass cowling and real pants on it, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. The Aloha one.
Yeah.
Nice.
All right. Build or fly?
As I get older, it's more build. It's very therapeutic to me. I can start a project and never finish it and be perfectly happy because it's the art of, creating something. I don't necessarily have to finish it. That being said, I love to fly, but I love to build as much or more.
Foam or balsa?
Balsa.
Electric, gas, or nitro?
Depends on when in my lifetime you would ask me. Right now it's electric. Huge portion of my life was glow, and a good slice of it was gas as well. But I don't own currently anything that's glow or gas powered at the moment. I have some, but they're not currently flying. I have a turbine, I guess. There you go. That one's
okay.
burning something.
Prandtl D, Prandtl M, or Droid?
I would say probably Prandtl M because it's kind of the hot rod. Really good flying airplanes, and they're pretty sporty.
FPV or line of sight?
Line of sight.
Cats or dogs?
Oh man, I have both. Probably more cat though.
Okay.
And the last and probably the most important, creamy or chunky?
Chunky.
And if you add marshmallow fluff, does it change?
I forgot about that one.
Say that again?
I said, and if you add marshmallow fluff, does it change?
No, I still like the nuts on there. And I love
Nice.
marshmallow fluff.
Nice. All right. Well, congratulations. You made it through the lightning round.
Woohoo!
Good work, sir.
All right, so let's briefly talk about our workbenches, and then we can
All right.
get out of here. I'll go ahead and start. So with the Corsair approaching being finished, there's not a whole lot I'm going to be able to do with it until I get a battery charger so I can get my batteries charged up again. I've got the Fogey that needs a new power pod, which won't take long. I just got to sit down and do it, and then put servos and all in the Depron wing and build some sort of a power pod for that. Which sounds like a lot. It's just some little tinkery stuff that's going to take some time, but I'm kind of, once this Corsair is done, rebuild the Fogey power pod, finish up the wing, and then I'm going to go ahead and launch into the HRC7 that Sam sent, and finally get that built. I'll have to reach out to Sam when I finish it and send him a picture. Because I hadn't really said much about it, but he had maybe I did at the time, but he had printed a special color for me. So when I get that built, I have to take a picture and send it to him.
Yeah, I remember you talking about it briefly, and I know that we've both had other projects that kind of took precedence, but I know both of us are excited. I know I've got one I traced out on the wall, so I've got pretty much one ready to start cutting out and putting together. And one to repair. So those have kind of been in the back burner, and I'm excited to get back to them for sure. And I know for me, I'm going to finish up and get this J1000, give it its maiden flight real soon here. Same with the Prandtl D. I was hoping to have the electronics ready so that tomorrow, if the weather's nice, like I think it might be, I was going to get it up in the air and see how it flew. And then, work on the Texan.
Nice.
Or the 7. Yeah. So it'll be busy.
Yeah.
As it always is.
All right. Well, you got anything else on your workbench?
No, that's it. That's enough for now. Oh, and don't forget, the next episode will be 2 weeks from this one.
Right. So this will kind of...
And then we'll be on a regular schedule.
Yep. Yeah. Well, if that's all we've got, then we'll see you guys next time. And between now and then, be safe with your projects and how you're working with them, guys.
Take your props off. For me.
Yeah. And me and everybody. Just
exactly.
be safe.
All right. Well, take care, guys. We'll talk to you next time.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Ingenuity was making its landing, and I watched that live. So that was cool to watch.
Live.
I was wondering, it's well, yeah.
As live as Earth can get it, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, even as you're watching it and they're going through everything and they're seeing the information come in, they're like, "We're approaching the stage. We're approaching the stage." I'm like, "No, that bad boy's either on the ground or in the dirt. Like, it's already done."
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was wondering if the Prandtl M was going to be on that mission, but anyway.
Yeah, so
Matthew,
Prandtl M is kind of dead. Al retired, and M was kind of an offshoot of the D project anyway. And the two people that were kind of spearheading the M, have gone on to other things, and both of them are actually working at different centers now. So there's still talk of doing some stuff, but it's more analytical stuff than trying to actually design and build a vehicle to go to Mars. I don't think that's in the cards anymore, unfortunately, which I'm really bummed about. I was, really hoping to be part of a vehicle on Mars.
Sorry, that was the Taylor Aero car.
I saw it fishing. So at Reno, I'd have to dig a picture out, but I got to see a real one. And fortunately, the guy
one of the
was
6.
yeah, it's the green and cream one that still flies.
Okay. Yep.
And
Yeah.
he let my son sit in it, which was really cool. The owner.
Oh, that's so cool.
I walked up, it was early in the week. Reno's like a 10-day thing, right? And it kind of builds into the crescendo at the end. And it was like, maybe Wednesday or Tuesday. And the time before I get busy doing my stuff and I could walk around and we'd look at stuff. And I walked up to it and I'm standing there staring at it. There's nobody around.
Like,
and
this is the one of 6 of these things ever built. There's only one that still flies. It's here.
Yeah, and I walk up, this guy walks up next to me, standing next to me, and he's like, he's not saying anything, and I'm telling my son, I'm like, oh my God, this is a Molt Taylor's Aero car. This is a big deal, and it attaches and does all this stuff. And the guy turns and he goes, you know what this is? And I'm like, well, I mean, I do. I don't know a whole lot about it. I know it's a Taylor Aero car, and I know about this and that and that. And he's like, well, yeah, it's mine. Do you want to take a close look at it? So it turned out it was the owner standing there. I'm like, yeah, this is really cool.
Heck yeah.
So we spent, about a half an hour talking to him, and I was really interested in how it connected and how all the control system worked.
Yeah, that would be my big, like, how does it, where's the mechanical coupler? And
he did everything except for literally take it apart. It's got these outriggers that come down in the wings. He showed me that. He opened all the inspection panels. He's like, here's how it hooks up, and all this cool stuff. So the guy was really cool. I wish I would have remembered his name, but what a neat experience,
Yeah. As you can see, I ended up, so there was a radio station that owned one, and that was their eye in the sky for traffic.
Really?
Yeah, and so this was the livery that they used for a couple of years.
Man, that is really cool.
Yeah, so I was like, all right, well, if I'm going to build this, I want to do something neat with it. And of course, I put the cars, because it just had that look, like it should have a car's face.
The googly eyes.
Yeah, and that was the other thing. I think it makes a spot appearance in, what is it, Cars 2, I think?
Yeah, it's in there.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, that's one of those things where I'm pretty proud of. I can't wait to build the other car and just have fun.
Do you have video of it on your channel?
I do. I can see if I can find basically I did a maiden where it crashed into the curb before it could take off. The damage
is
was
that a maiden?
big.
Is that a maiden if it doesn't fly?